Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to another Palavie Market Research video. Today we're going to be discussing Larry Ellison, my personal favorite billionaire. Why is he my favorite billionaire? Well, he's kind of like Ra's al Ghul. You guys remember Liam Neeson's character in the Dark Knight movies? He's kind of like that, but less evil, I guess? But Larry Ellison is currently worth $147 billion. He was best friends with Steve Jobs. He was also very close to Bill Clinton when Bill Clinton was president. I think he was his first or second largest campaign contributor. They basically paid for Bill Clinton to become president. Um, he also invested $1 billion cash in Tesla in 2018, and that turned into $13 billion. He is very close with Elon Musk. He has also been on the front lines of fighting Google, just in keeping them in check. Larry Ellison is as badass as it gets, and I have never met Larry, obviously. I mean, maybe that's not obvious to you guys. Surprisingly, I haven't met Larry. But I feel very close to Larry because this is his favorite book, Vincent Cronin's Napoleon. And I highly recommend you guys read this book because one, it's very old. And one of my mentors when I was growing up, one of my neighbors was this man named Victor Niederhofer. You guys can look him up. One of the more eccentric Wall Street people. He was an apprentice to George Soros, and he was worth many hundreds of millions of dollars. But he was more famous because of the amount of billionaires he created who worked underneath him. But what Victor Niederhofer told me, he told me to never read a book that wasn't at least 100 years old. I know that's strange advice, but this was in sync with that advice. If you read that book, it's not just a great story on Napoleon, but it's also a phenomenal history book about what the world was like at that time and the culture, and it just captures that moment, okay? But let's dive into Larry Ellison a little bit deeper because Larry, he has, in this interview we're about to watch together, he offers us a lot of wisdom, a lot of profound perspective. And this seems like a little bit of a rare older video. It's from 1997. I was 1 year old when this video was created. So let's watch it together. Okay.
I think Winston Churchill has a wonderful quote, which is, "You make a living by what you get. You make a life by what you give." I think we live. If we live intelligently, we devise a strategy to intelligently pursue happiness. And there should be a book saying the intelligent pursuit of happiness, Hitchhiker's Guide. But there isn't such a book. But there should be. And I think more than anything else, that's what all of us need is this guide to how to intelligently pursue happiness. I mean, Jefferson guaranteed our right to do it, but he didn't give us a map. And I think we should think of altruism, giving, as a strategy for happiness. Forget whether the morality of it all, that's the right thing to do. Instead, think of it as something totally in your self-interest. If you can help others, you will feel great. The more you can help, the more intelligently you can help, the bigger lever you can get on the world to make it better, the better you will feel about yourself, the more joy you'll experience. That is the road to bliss. That is the intelligent pursuit of happiness, and that is what we should do.
I think one way we can reframe what he's saying here is I was writing about this yesterday. Intelligence isn't your IQ. It isn't your EQ. It isn't how you balance both. Intelligence is purely defined by your ability to get what you want out of life. But then it begs this much more interesting question. What do you want from life? If you only want to, have models around and Lamborghinis and, superficial friends who want to be around that too, then that's a low quality want, right? But if you want to say build a bunch of orphanages and solve cancer, right? That's a very good want. So and I think that's actually something that Larry is kind of touching on here is this idea that your intelligence and your happiness are actually kind of interlinked. And your ability to get what you want is actually more of an indication of your intelligence than just like these raw IQ or EQ or the balance of both metrics, right? So if you can actually get what you want and you can continuously improve the quality of how you answer what do you want, then you're probably going to end up in a very fulfilled, peaceful, and successful place.
That is my argument for giving, not simply that it's the right and moral thing to do. It happens to also be that, but I don't find that as persuasive. Is that is the road to happiness. The most deeply afraid I can remember being was once my mother came. I guess I was 5, and my mother worked. No, I think I was a little older because I guess I might have been 6, and I went to school, went to school, and my mother came home very late from work, so it was 6 o'clock. So
One thing for context about Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison was born in like Queens, New York, and or maybe it was Harlem, bad area of New York. He was born to a 19-year-old mother. When he was like 9 months old, I believe, he was moved to the south side of Chicago to live with his aunt and uncle, I believe. And he didn't know that he was adopted and not living with his real parents until he was like 12 or 13 years old. So this guy comes from actually nothing. And he also had this profound effect on his psyche, which he doesn't really, but I imagine that if you're a 13-year-old kid and you find out that the people you think are your parents aren't your parents, your psyche likely transforms.
no one was home, and I was very worried that my mother wouldn't come home, and I was deeply afraid. That's the only time I can remember being deeply afraid. I was making all sorts of deals with God if he would return her to me. There's a mild degree of fear. There certainly is fear. I mean, fear. Sociobiologists will tell you that fear is the prevalent human emotion. Fear is the dominant emotion in all of us. But your expression was deeply afraid. I certainly feel a little stressed if I'm in a brand new. I just bought a jet fighter and I just flying it for the first time. And if we're flying very low to the ground and doing aerobatics very low to the ground, it's.
Did I mention Larry Ellison bought a jet fighter? Yes, a fighter jet. Him and his friends used. I don't know if he still has it, but this dude bought a fighter jet to play around with his friends. Okay?
I wouldn't call it fear, but it's a little bit of a rush, and it's kind of mild fear that goes on that gets the adrenaline going, and I thrive on that. So I like that's a pleasant. I don't know if you want to call that fear, but that's a somewhat pleasant experience for me. I mean, that makes me a little bit odd, but extreme fear, no, is awful. But mild, out on the edge a little bit, where you have a mild sensation of apprehension and concern, is something I actually enjoy. We're constantly testing ourselves. We're trying to understand our own level of competency, our ability to control our own world, ability to put ourselves at risk and then save our own lives.
Living on the cutting edge of your own understanding of your own competence. How often am I talking to you guys about this? This is exactly how you grow. You live on the edge of your own ability. You take on goals that are just outside of your ability to actually succeed in them. You need to take on goals that are not to-do lists. They're not chores, right? So if you have a goal and you can achieve it, like right? Then that's a to-do list item. That's a chore. That's like doing your dishes. Goals are literally defined by it being something you kind of think you can't maybe do, or you have a new skill set that is required that allows you to then succeed in that venture once you unlock that skill that you need to unlock. So another phenomenal point here by Larry.
So I think, again, this is a form of test. There is always an element of risk when you're risking your ego when you play in a chess match. You're risking your ego and sometimes your life, depending on when you're doing certain kinds of flying. But in fact, I'm overemphasizing. I mean, I really don't think I do things that are endanger my life when I fly or endanger my life. I mean, we were in a very nasty boat race from Sydney to Hobart. We were in a storm for 14 hours, but I really never felt like I was going to die. Sometimes I felt like I wanted to die because literally everyone on board got pretty sick, including, and they're all professional sailors. It was a horrible storm, and you had a lot of professional sailors were puking. But I never really felt the same kind of deep fear I felt as a child. I think most overachievers are driven not so much by the pursuit of success, but by the fear of failure. But again, unless failure gets very close and very nearby, that fear doesn't reach profound levels. But it drives us. It drives me. It drives me to work very hard. It drives me to make sure that my life is orderly, that I'm in control of my company or in control of the airplane or boat or what have you, so that I'm not at risk of failure. And whenever I feel even remotely close to being at risk of failure, I can't stop working. There are an enormous number of people in the world who really want standard answers. They want everyone to wear their hair the same way, everyone to conduct business the same way, everyone to dress the same way, everyone to go to the same church. There's a very and if you wander outside of these norms, people are highly critical because it's threatening to them. Because they're living their life one way and they believe that's the proper way to live their life. And if you live your life a different way and you answer questions differently, that makes them feel very uncomfortable. And they say, well, this person's different from I am, and then they simply go a little further, and they say this person's different and wrong, and I'm different and right. And so people have been, very, very critical, and people will be critical of you if you do things a little bit differently. It takes a certain amount of strength not to succumb to fashion. I try to think things through, and I try to always ask two questions about my personal policies in life.
This is something that Tim Ferriss talks about very clearly. It's arguably safer to do what is the opposite of what everyone else is doing, because the average person, the usual person you're interacting with, is nowhere close to what you want to be doing, right? So if you do the opposite of what the crowd is doing, you probably will lead to a better result. And a lot of the things that are in fashion, I mean, think about how things get in fashion in the first place. And even what are the psychological requirements for someone to be a genuine truth seeker? This is something I've been reading about a lot lately, is that most people, because they're so consumed by just surviving, right? Survival. Just fundamentally, they are so consumed with the need to survive that what happens, right? Well, they don't have the ability to seek truth, because if you are only concerned with survival, then you're overly concerned with being accepted socially. And you can't be a genuine truth seeker if you are overly concerned with being accepted by your social environment, right? Because truth is almost always antithetical to what the consensus narrative is.
Are they fair? Are they morally correct? And do they work? So I try to reason things back from first principles. I try to think about things and come to conclusions and make my own decisions. And if other people if I've thought things through.
This is something you will always hear the smartest people talk about. When I met Eric Weinstein in whatever year it was, I was talking to him and asking some more academic questions about how, actually in the context of, we made a video about this recently, in the context of alternative measures to GDP and how do we measure what an economy should value. And all he told me to do was to read peer-reviewed physics papers on first principles thinking in the context of physics from the late 1920s. Okay? That was really great advice, but basically all I'm trying to say is you need to learn to think in first principles. What does that mean? It means you need to continuously learn how to think at the deepest level, or the most foundational level, right? The first principle level. And you'll learn that as you go deeper and deeper and deeper, the first principles of any given topic have almost infinite depth to them, and you'll also realize how important psychology is along the way. So learn to think in first principles.
If someone has a logical criticism and can explain to me why what I'm doing is wrong, and they can convince me, I'll change. If they really can, if they have good reasons, I'll just alter my behavior. I love it when people point out I'm wrong, explain to me why I'm wrong, and I then change. That's great. I don't want to be wrong. I would love to be right. And if I am wrong, I love it when people stop me. But if people just throw labels at you and throw criticisms around that are not rational, again, basically call you names. You can't change your behavior that you think is right just because someone's calling you names, and it's not not the conventional way of behaving. Most of the time, I let it go. Sometimes people have a
This can be very frustrating, and I've experienced this a lot lately, where you have people in your life that you respect and you love, and they offer you feedback, and you want feedback, right? This is what Larry's touching on here. You want helpful feedback because that allows you to improve. But it can be very difficult to discern what is a high quality feedback and what is just an emotional response in them. One thing you'll constantly see is that people hate on what they gave up on, right? So they might be able to, you know, structure a unconstructive form of criticism on you in a illustrative and beautiful way that seems constructive, that seems positive and worthwhile to you, but at the end of the day all it's actually doing in function is taking away your power. Discerning the difference is very difficult, especially when it involves loved ones, but you have to continuously get better at that or else you won't get very far. It's super freaking important. And the worst thing you can do, by the way, is just quit, right? Is just to not, is just to stop taking feedback, right? So that isn't an intelligent approach. So please don't make that mistake.
way of saying things that are so hurtful and so offensive, or say things that are just patently untrue, that I feel like I have to defend myself. So if someone says something that's factually in error, you just said, Larry did this and I didn't do that, then I'll defend myself. But if they say, if it's just calling me a random name, then I forget it. I think academic success is an advantage. I think academic success is an advantage. But it by no means assures success in business. I think if you're an outstanding student, you're probably going to be reasonably successful in business. You might not be amongst the most successful people in business or even in science. The straight-A students sometimes are, well there's no doubt that they have talent. Maybe it would be better if they gotten straight A's in math and physics, but flunked a sociology course where the professor was just awful, or got a C in a sociology course where that there wasn't a need to always please, always do well, even if it didn't make sense to do well and put in the effort. So it's very interesting. So what you look for, at least what we look for when we're hiring people, are people that certainly have a strong aptitude in mathematics and in physics and in music, which is very highly correlated to mathematics. But also people who make judgments as to where they're going to invest their time. Wonderful story about a young man who was near the top of his class at Carnegie Mellon and quit the week before he was going to graduate. Without going into all of the details, it was that interesting judgment that he made, that he was just going to bail out, that set him apart, strangely enough, from a lot of the other very top grads that we have hired. He makes his own decisions, and that's a very useful thing. And I think corporations need a combination of people who hopefully all the people are talented. Some are people that really want to please and are easy to manage. Others really are kind of driven to their to a drummer only they can hear, and they will constantly question my wisdom and won't be the least bit shy about challenging me and hopefully keep me from making mistakes. I think learning how to program is a wonderful discipline. Computers are unforgivingly logical, and they'll do exactly what you tell them. And it's just a wonderful, again, it's a wonderful
Great advice in
training to
1997.
learn how to program a computer. So I would encourage people to take this up. Very much, it's much more important than handwriting. I just finished Vincent Cronin's book on Napoleon, a man who definitely needed better PR. They just spun,
Oh my gosh.
Napoleon very badly with proper PR people. Napoleon was codified the laws for the first time in Europe. He was constantly eliminating kings and other tyrants. He opened the ghettos and stopped religious discrimination. He was an extraordinary man. He wrote a lot of laws himself. He was incredibly polite, generous almost to a fault. A remarkable person who was vilified. Really was vilified by who? The kings that he deposed. So the kings were not thrilled. The kings of England, and the old king of France, and the kings of Prussia, and the Tsar of Russia, were all threatened by this man who was bringing democracy. And I think it's interesting to read this book and look at Napoleon and see how history has treated this man. There's even the expression, he's got what is it, a Napoleon complex, or Napoleon. Napoleon was of average height for a French person. The idea is not. It's just preposterous. Treating maybe the most gifted man of the 19th century as some kind of despot. He was a liberator, a lawgiver, and a man of just incredible gifts. And he never considered himself a soldier. He considered himself a politician, though he's probably the greatest soldier, the greatest general, perhaps in all history. And I think it's interesting to read about him for a couple of reasons. To see what one man of modest birth can do with his life, and to see how history can distort the truth entirely. And the job of historians is often just that, to distort history. Because history is based on fashion. So we constantly change America. We're changing American history all the time. And whatever is politically fashionable, the school districts decide that they want to emphasize this person in history and de-emphasize that person in history. So we're constantly rewriting history all the time. And it's interesting and illuminating to come to understand that even history is based on fashion. Even morality, popular morality, is based on fashion. Real morality is based on reason. And never make the mistake between the two.
I mean, that's such a profound point, guys. Like, if you sit and think about this for a second, how fashionable morality is, right? Like, right now, we believe that it is moral to empower people who are under the age of 18 to transition to becoming other genders, and to give them sterilization, and and surgeries that change their genitals. And we believe that to be a moral and almost virtuous thing to do. But it's not hard to imagine 200 years ago that would describing that to a clergyman, or like a healthy Christian community, say that if they want those services in their community, they would view that as maybe the most evil thing that they could possibly imagine, right? So it is a disturbing truth, and just like how our founding fathers were totally cool with slavery, right? Blah blah blah. Morality is fashionable, and that's why I talk about it so often, especially like with my avoid taxes save lives video that I made recently. Like, it is very difficult to discern, especially as young men, what is moral, what is not moral, and what is the culture telling you is a moral choice when it is actually the exact opposite.
The opportunity in this country is astounding. Everyone who works hard and maybe a little cleverly has the opportunity to make almost anything possible. And that's the American dream, that anything here is possible. We are not held back.
This is very interesting I think that this is a 1997 truth. Like, I do think, in my opinion, America probably peaked in its civilization's value to its own citizenry in the late 1990s. I've felt that way for a long time. I wonder what Larry's insight would be today, post 2020, 2024 America. If you would feel that America is still that place, he might, what a lot of people say is that America is that place, um, but the quality that it is providing that American dream is just lower. It's less than it used to be. But it is still, but they will still say, like, on the relative global stage, it is still the place where like the American dream is the most real. I tend to disagree. I see that the American dream is the most real in two places predominantly, Poland and Puerto Rico. I don't see it to be as real in, say, California than those two places, not even close, to be honest. Unless you are like just interested in building widgets and novelty products for venture backed firms that are institutionalizing entrepreneurship in those regions. So, yeah, especially which is interesting because entrepreneurship in 2024 requires essentially zero venture capital. Um, Effectively, like, you can start any business with a newsletter. If you're being honest, like even like a space manufacturing business, I guarantee you, if you wanted to start that, you could start it with a newsletter and then leverage that. Whatever, that's a different video. But yeah, let's continue.
Immigrants come here and in a single generation do extraordinary things. That this country is not perfect, but compared with every other country in the world, it's absolutely fabulous. And there's unlimited opportunity. It requires hard work. It requires a little bit of luck. But still, in America, anything is possible.
Interesting stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think that those are some really interesting takeaways from him. I feel that he's probably. I'm very curious what his perspective on America is today. But yeah, there's a lot to learn from this guy. There isn't that much interviews, and like especially an interview like that he's done anytime recently. He has done some keynotes because he's now, I believe, the chief technology officer at Oracle versus like his previous roles as like CEO, and he's still chairman, I believe. But yeah, but he obviously, it's overly technical. It's very relevant to Oracle and the business there. So getting his like macro, global, cultural, social, entrepreneurial mindset kind of perspective this is really the only video I found that covers those things. Thank you, gentlemen. We will pick this up again tomorrow. And Larry, if you're watching this, what's up?